Morning, my husband shattered my wrist against the kitchen counter. Our son was sitting 6 feet away eating cereal. That's the detail that stays with me. Not the sound, though I still hear it sometimes, that hollow crack that didn't even seem real. But the image of my 7-year-old looking up from his bowl of Cheerios, spoon frozen halfway to his mouth, eyes wide and completely still. Like a deer who already knows, I want to tell you how I got there. Not to make you feel sorry for me, I've had enough of that, from the women at the shelter, from my mother, from myself. I want to tell you because I almost didn't make it out, and the thing that saved me wasn't a lawyer or a hotline or some sudden surge of courage. It was my son's voice on a phone call he wasn't supposed to make, saying 6 words that broke everything open. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I met my husband at 26. I was working at a property management company in Columbus, Ohio, entry level, answering phones, learning the software, dreaming about eventually getting my real estate license. He walked in to inquire about a commercial lease, and he was the kind of man who fills a room without trying, tall, confident. The type who remembers the name of every person he meets and uses it often, so you feel seen. His name was Everett. We dated for 14 months. He was attentive in a way I mistook for love. He wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. He called it devotion. His mother called it devotion too, when I mentioned it once, laughing it off over Sunday dinner. He just loves hard, she said. Always has, since he was little. I believed that. We got married in September, in my aunt's backyard in Dayton. 60 people. My dress cost $400 from a consignment shop, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned. My dad cried during the vows. My little sister caught the bouquet and screamed. Everything that came after, I have to remind myself, that day was real too. The first time Everett grabbed me, we'd been married 11 months. We were arguing about money. He transferred a large amount from our joint checking account, without telling me. Almost $3,000, and when I asked where it went, he said I was interrogating him, that I treated him like a suspect in his own home. I told him I just wanted to understand our finances. I said it carefully, the way you say things when you already sense the air has changed. He grabbed my arm so hard he left a bruise shaped like 4 fingers. Then he let go immediately, stepped back, and looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. He cried. He said he didn't know what happened. He said he was under so much pressure at work, that he hadn't been sleeping, that he was sorry, he was so sorry, he was never do that again. I believe that too. We had our son the following spring. I named him Theo, and for a while, maybe a year, maybe a little more, things were genuinely better. Everett was softer around the baby. He'd come home and pick Theo up before he even took off his jacket, carry him around the kitchen, narrating everything. This is the refrigerator. This is where Daddy keeps his leftovers that Mummy throws away. It made me laugh. I held onto that laugh for a long time. But stress has a way of finding the cracks in a person and widening them. When Theo was about 2, Everett's business partnership fell apart. I won't pretend I understood all the details. He never really explained them. Just came home one evening looking hollowed out and told me that his partner had screwed him over. After that, the money got tight in ways I wasn't allowed to question. I learned quickly not to ask. I learned to watch his face when he came through the door, so I could read the evening before it started. The grabs became shoves. The shoves became something worse. And somewhere in there, I stopped being a person who had opinions, and started being a person who had opinions, and started being a person who managed atmospheres. I didn't tell anyone for a long time. My mother lived 40 minutes away. My sister lived in Phoenix. I had friends, had is the right word, but friendships require showing up, and I stopped showing up. Everett didn't like me going out without him. He didn't say it that way. He'd just make the evening difficult enough that leaving became harder than staying. A comment about my outfit. A disagreement that erupted right as I was about to walk out the door, and then the guilt of leaving on bad terms. Small mechanisms, invisible from the outside. By the time Theo was 5, I had reduced my well to the size of our house. I told myself it wasn't that bad. I knew what bad looked like. I'd seen the campaigns, the PSAs, the hotline numbers printed on the back of bathroom stall doors. I thought bad meant broken bones and emergency rooms. I thought if I hadn't ended up in an ER, I was still in the category of manageable. That's the lie I told myself the longest, that it was manageable. The morning in the kitchen happened in February, 2 years ago. Theo was 7. He was eating breakfast before school and I was packing his lunch, and I made the mistake, the truly unforgivable mistake, apparently, of asking Everett about a charge I'd seen on his credit card statement. A hotel, 2 nights. A city, 3 hours away. During a week he told me he was at a trade conference. He didn't answer. I asked again, softly, my back still half turned to him. I said, I'm not accusing you of anything, I just... And that was as far as I got. He grabbed my right wrist and slammed it against the edge of the granite counter. Once. Fast. Like a reflex. The pain was white and total, and I heard myself make a sound I didn't recognize. This small animal sound. And then I was on my knees on the kitchen floor, cradling my arm against my chest. Theo was completely still. Everett said, that's what happens when you go through my things. Then he picked up his keys and left for work. Theo slid off his stool and came to me. He was still holding his spoon. He crouched down next to me on the floor, and he put his small hand on my shoulder, and he said, Mommy, Mommy, look at me. I looked at him. He said, Is it broken? I said I didn't know. I said I was okay. I was not okay. He said, I'm going to get the phone. I told him no. I told him it was fine. I just needed a minute, don't worry. Go finish your breakfast. You're going to be late. I was already doing the calculus. Urgent care versus ER, how to explain it, whether I could drive with one hand, what story held up. Theo went and got my phone anyway. He brought it to me and set it carefully in my good hand, and he said, You should call someone. I stared at that phone for a long time. My wrist was already swelling. The school bus was going to come in 22 minutes. I thought about all the calls I could make and why I wouldn't make any of them. Then Theo took the phone back from me. He unlocked it. He knew my code. We taught him for emergencies, and before I could say anything, he'd already called my father. I heard it ring twice, then my dad's voice. Hey buddy, you're up early. Everything okay? And Theo said, very clearly, with 7-year-old gravity, Grandpa, you need to come. Dad hurt Mum's arm and she's on the floor. My father was at my house in 38 minutes. He would later tell me he ran 2 red lights. He came through the front door. I'd unlocked it for him, and he found me at the kitchen table with a dish towel wrapped around my wrist and Theo sitting next to me, his backpack already on, watching the door. My father looked at my arm. He looked at Theo. He looked at me. He didn't say anything for a moment. My dad is not a man who cries easily. He's 71 years old. He grew up in rural Kentucky. He's the kind of man who fixes things quietly and without ceremony. But his face did something complicated in that moment that I had never seen it do before, and he had to turn away briefly toward the window. Then he turned back and said, Can you walk? I said yes. He said, Then let's get you to the hospital, and on the way, you're going to tell me everything. My wrist was fractured. 2 hairline fractures, the ER physician said, consistent with impact against a hard edge. She asked me quietly how it happened. She was young, late 20s maybe, and she asked it the way people ask when they already understand the answer and they're giving you the space to say it. I told her my husband did it. It was the first time I had said that sentence out loud, to anyone. She nodded like I'd said something ordinary and asked if I was safe and whether I had somewhere to go. She told me she was required to document what I'd told her. She said that wasn't meant to frighten me, it was actually something I could use. Documentation matters, she said. If you decide to pursue anything legally, this record exists. My father was in the waiting room with Theo. I sat in that curtained bay by myself for a little while after she left, looking at my wrapped wrist, thinking about the word documentation, thinking about all the times I'd minimized and explained away and quietly moved on, leaving no record at all. I had left no record of anything. My father drove us to my parents' house that afternoon. My mother met us at the door and pulled me into a hug that lasted a long time, and I could feel her shaking slightly, or maybe that was me. She took Theo to the kitchen to make grilled cheese. My father sat with me in the living room. He asked me how long. I told him the truth, most of it, the parts I could get out without completely falling apart. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say what I expected him to say, didn't talk about what he wanted to do to Everett, didn't catastrophize, didn't make me feel like I destroyed everything by staying quiet for so long. He just listened. When I was done, he said, "I want you to talk to someone who knows how this works. Will you let me help you do that?" I said yes. He'd already found a family law attorney before we left the hospital parking lot. He'd looked her up on his phone while Theo was using the restroom. Her name was Miss Garland. He showed me her reviews, her firm's website, her photograph. He'd already called her office and left a voicemail. She called back that evening. Miss Garland was matter-of-fact and calm in a way I needed. She explained what we had, the ER report documenting the injury and my statement about its cause. She said that was significant. She asked if there were other incidents, and I told her there were. I just had nothing written down, no photographs, no records. "That's common," she said. "We work with what we have." She explained my options clearly. A domestic violence protective order could be fired immediately, which would require Everett to vacate the home. Then we would pursue divorce proceedings. Because we had a minor child, custody would be central to the case. "He'll deny it," I said. "They always do," she said. "But you have a 7-year-old who called your father from the scene, the ER documentation, and I'm guessing your father would testify to what he saw when he arrived." I said my father would testify to anything I needed. She said, "Then we're in a reasonable position." That was the moment something shifted. Not dramatically, not some cinematic surge of resolve. It was quieter than that. More like a door I'd been standing in front of for years had finally just opened. The protective order was granted 2 days later. Everett was served at his office. His mother called me 3 times that day. I didn't answer. My sister flew in from Phoenix that weekend. I hadn't even told her everything yet, and she still bought a plane ticket the same day my dad called her. She showed up at my parents' door with a roller bag and a box of those expensive chocolate-covered pretzels I'd liked since I was a teenager. And she hugged me in the entryway for a long time without saying anything. Then she pulled back and looked at me and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said I didn't want her to worry. She said, "That's not your job. That has never been your job." I didn't have an answer to that. I still don't really. I think I had been so occupied with managing everything quietly, with keeping the surface smooth and the atmosphere livable, that I had genuinely forgotten I was allowed to take up space in other people's lives. The hotel turned out to be exactly what I thought it was. Miss Garland's investigative contact found financial records that Everett had been less careful about than he believed. There had been someone, a woman he'd met through work, for at least 2 years. They'd taken trips. He'd bought things. He had a secondary credit card I didn't know about. I wasn't surprised. By that point, I think some part of me had known for a long time. I'd just been afraid that knowing would require me to do something about it, and doing something had seemed impossible. It didn't seem impossible anymore. At the divorce proceedings, Everett's attorney argued that my wrist injury was an accident, that I'd fallen, that I was emotionally unstable, that I had taken his son without warning and was attempting to alienate him from his child. Ms. Garland put my father on the stand. He described in plain and measured language exactly what he saw when he arrived at my house that February morning. He described my wrist. He described Theo sitting at the table with his backpack on, calm in the way children are calm when they've decided to be the steady one. She submitted the ER report. She submitted the financial records. She submitted the phone records showing Theo's call to my father at 7:48 in the morning. Everett's attorney had less to work with than he'd anticipated. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I left. I have primary custody of Theo. Everett has supervised visitation, which may be reviewed after 2 years, contingent on his completion of a batterer intervention program. He fought the supervised requirement. He lost. The house was sold. I took my share and put a deposit on a rental in a neighborhood closer to my parents. A small house, 2 bedrooms, a yard with an oak tree that Theo immediately designated as a climbing tree. I got my real estate license that fall. I am not where I thought I would be at 32. I am somewhere else entirely, and slowly I am finding that somewhere else is not as bad as I feared. Theo sees a therapist. His therapist says he's processing things well, that he shows strong emotional literacy for his age, which made me laugh and cry at the same time. His therapist said the fact that he took action that morning, that he felt capable of helping, was actually protective, that children who have some sense of agency in frightening situations tend to recover better than children who feel only helpless. I think about that often, because I'd spent so long believing that the best thing I could do for my son was keep things stable, keep the surface smooth, don't disrupt, don't escalate, don't leave. I told myself I was protecting him by staying. I had it precisely backward. The night before Everett was served with a protective order, Theo and I were sitting on the couch at my parents' house. He was leaning against me, half watching a nature documentary about migratory birds. My wrist was in a brace. The house was quiet. Out of nowhere, he said, "Mom, I'm glad I called Grandpa." I said, "Me too, buddy." He said, "Were you going to call someone?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the birds on the screen, flying in formation over some grey sea, and I tried to find the honest answer. I said, "I don't know if I was." He nodded, like that made sense. Then he leaned a little heavier against me and went back to watching the birds. I sat there with his weight against my side, this small and entirely serious person who had picked up the phone when I couldn't, and I thought, I will not waste this. I will not go back. I will not make him pick up the phone for me twice. I knew what it is to believe you're not in danger because you haven't been in the emergency room. I knew what it is to explain away the grabs and the shoves and the money you're not allowed to understand because the alternative explanation is too large to hold. I knew what it is to look at your life from the outside and think, this is fine, other people have it worse, I can manage this. I knew what it is to be wrong about all of that. If you are reading this and something in it is familiar, not the exact details but the feeling, the constant calculation, the way you've learned to watch someone's face before you know what kind of evening it's going to be. Please hear me when I say, that is not a marriage, that is a managed fear, and you deserve something else. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START to 887888. If you can't call, you can chat online at thehotline.org. They are available around the clock, and they don't tell you what to do, they just help you figure out what your options are. I am 32 years old. I have a real estate license and a rental house with an oak tree and a son who is, against all odds, doing okay. I am still learning how to take up space. I am still learning that asking for help is not the same as failing, but I am learning. And I am here.